I'm building a product business so I can sell my inventions, and at this point, I need a studio space. Luckily for me, we have this guest bedroom, but before I could launch this, I'd have to rebuild this 3 separate times. The landlord was like, "We're selling the house." And what went wrong each time completely changed my career. I'm Rob, and I'm building my product company, but while I was at Apple, I got to see what some of the coolest prototype labs and design studios in the world could look like. So now that I'm out on my own, it's time for me to build one for myself. Now, since I'm not just a designer, I'm gonna need a few things to help me with all the areas of my business. So these are the 8 requirements I need that can hopefully help get me to a successful product launch. Number 1. This is our guest bedroom, so it has to be usable when family and friends visit since we don't have anywhere else for them to sleep. I also need a design workspace, printer storage, a place to manufacture and assemble my products. I need a place to pack and ship everything, also an easy way to film content, and then tons of storage for all my hardware. Oh yeah, and number 8, the last and most crucial, we're gonna save for the end. At the beginning of this video, I mentioned that I need to do this studio build more than once. It actually ended up being 3 separate times, but I'll explain that later. Now, when we first moved to Silicon Valley, we had this awesome rental house, and it had a spare guest bedroom that was perfect for this build. It was the first time I actually had a space where I could see myself settling in and really start taking my product design more seriously, because up until then, all I'd done was make some fun toys and have a couple videos go viral. But I've always wanted to design and sell my own products, kind of like the people on Shark Tank, and I actually have a lot of the skills to do it now since it's my normal day job, but what I don't have is a good attention span, hence the dedicated studio. I didn't have great lighting in here yet, so sorry for this footage, but it really was a great space to set up a guest bedroom and build out a workspace. I wanted to clean everything up and find a way to combine a guest room with a functioning studio on a budget, because at this point, I hadn't sold anything yet and it was more of a dream than a reality. This video is sort of going to jump back in time because some of the footage was from a few years ago before everything blew up. I got some of my printers set up and spent some time trying to organize my desk. Things were finally looking like we were gonna have a space ready before I needed to launch my first product. But then out of nowhere, we were absolutely blindsided by our landlord. For those of you who aren't from Silicon Valley and might not know, real estate there is insane. Like, we lived on a little street with single family homes, and next door to us, some guy bought 3 perfectly good houses in a row and tore them all down just to build one big ugly mansion because there's so little land left in the area. So lucky for us, our landlord got an unsolicited offer for our rental house and he told us he was just gonna sell it. Not ideal for many reasons, but I asked him for how much because we honestly really love that place. It had an orange tree and like a giant fruit garden in the backyard, and if it was within our price range, then maybe we would think about it. Well, the price was $1.5 million for a 2-bed, 1-bath, which was only like $1.2 million above our price range. So before I could even get an awesome studio video montage, we had to tear it all down and move on to studio number 2. It sort of taught me that if I really want to build my own company, I need to control more of the factors. Having a landlord made things feel way more unstable, especially if I wanted to start investing in my business longer term. But I just wasn't at a point that I could afford to buy something or invest in a more permanent solution. So I figured let's keep dual pathing it and save everything we can from my corporate job so that maybe in a few years we could afford to buy a place with a little more stability. So we started the search for a new place in Silicon Valley, somewhere with a little extra space so I could try to grow my business. With a lot of businesses, you don't actually need a lot of space, but I've learned with physical products, depending on what you're selling, it can take up a ton of room. The volume of packaging and inventory itself is huge, but then you add in the mess of designing and prototyping, all the machines and tools, it gets really difficult to contain things before a launch. So my friend recommended these cool organizing totes to me that are like customizable milk crates, which will hopefully help me manage my inventory and hardware going forward. I used the Cricut machine we made our wedding invites with to label everything, and at this point, we were ready to move into our second house. Now, as far as timeframes go, I had mostly designed my first product in studio number 1, but I hadn't actually launched it yet because this was about the time I started really sinking into my corporate job, which meant tons of late night calls and traveling back and forth to Korea, which I still think was worth it because I was basically getting paid to learn how to launch a product and build prototypes from some of the highest skilled engineers in the world. People say if you don't know how to do what you want to do, then get a job that pays you to learn it, which I kind of just stumbled into. Like, I know basic engineering, but this place was a whole other level. It's part of the reason I have some of the confidence to share my journey here and practice building some products for my first launch. Oh yeah, it's a twist and pill organizer I designed to take my vitamins with me when I go to the gym and when I travel. Anyways, I was still working my full-time job at Apple, so I was pretty busy. The rumors are true. You work insane hours, but I was pretty determined to get this thing off the ground. Because although Apple was my dream job, I still always had this thing in the back of my head, like screaming at me to do my own thing. I don't really know how to explain it, because whenever I would tell people what I was up to, they kind of blankly stare at me and say, "So you'd rather make wing-ding fidget toys instead of work at the most prestigious company in the world?" And I'd say, well, yeah, but no, but I mean, I think I'm happy, but I can't sleep at night because I feel like this is what I was meant to do. So yeah, that's where my brain was at. It's a lot of the reason I was putting in so much effort to get a dedicated space for creating things, because I just felt like I was spending so much time at work and so little time making stuff for myself and for my business. And if I had a place that I could just go in and lock the door behind me, I'd have no choice but to build. Looking back, I don't think this was wrong, but I definitely think it might have been an excuse that just delayed me starting the hard work. Dude, I'm making like negative progress. And I forgot to turn the light on. What am I doing? At this point, we were really picking up steam. I was making a huge mess everywhere in our house, which gave me even more motivation to get this studio space set up. All right. Ready? Boom! We'll have garbage, and then we'll have filament scrap. Oh, I've got all this trash. Let me just... Got the boxes all laid out. Got my printers all set up. Got the tool wall and this whole area done. The other half, this. What do I do with that? Ugh. But this time, not only did we have a guest bedroom, we also had a garage that I could set up for all my dirty tools. And if you're a person like me, you can understand how exciting this is to have a dedicated space to just tinker and build stuff. So that's what I started to do. I was finalizing my product for launch and was making some fun side projects, and most importantly, I was finally getting this studio space set up how I like it and really getting into a good flow. We had our guest bed. I was getting my desk set up. There was this little closet that fit my 3D printers perfectly, and I took the closet doors off and just threw them on top of the bed to give me some more table space for manufacturing. This also doubled as my ship station, and then when I needed to upgrade some of my machines, I had extra room in the garage for bigger and better stuff. This gave me mostly everything I needed to finally launch the pill bottle and manufacture everything in-house, and I was spending a ton of time in the studio making products for people, and it was finally getting my footing building this business, and I only had 2 items left to check off on my studio list, when all of a sudden, our life timeline got a little bit compressed. My life goal has always been to start and build my own product company, but I'm also an engineer who needs a lot of external validation. So when I was working in the semiconductor industry, I was applying to some big tech companies just to see what would happen, and then a year and a half after I submitted my resume, this Apple opportunity came around, and it was just too good to turn down. So with my wife's support, we packed up our entire lives on the East Coast. We sold our house and we moved across the country here to Silicon Valley for this job. We weren't planning on staying forever, but after a few years, we really started to crave that sweet, sweet East Coast rain and sleet. So when my wife got offered a new role that would bring us back to the Boston area, it only seemed fair that we pack up everything and take the Oregon Trail back home. So we went from this spaceship to this spaceship. I left Apple, and the road trip back was a wild experience, but that's for the next video. Unfortunately, this meant 2 things. First, I had to leave Apple because they don't have a spaceship donut building in New Hampshire. And second, studio number 2 also had to get torn down. And once again, no cool montage video because I never even got to finish it. The second studio taught me a lot because we thought Silicon Valley would be the perfect fit for us. But in the end, I feel like doing what you're called to do, even if it's really hard, is what'll make the best life story. So we packed up our entire lives again and adventured back the 3,000 miles to the East Coast. And I was actually selling a ton of products at this point, which was so cool and just seemed kind of kismet that my wife got this banger new job opportunity and I could really really give my dream a shot. Or at least that's what we thought. But once we landed, we realized we didn't really have a plan for where exactly we would live or how I was going to run my business from a temp apartment. So for 3 months, we operated out of this 500 square foot apartment with all my machines running, and I tried to keep up with orders while we looked for our final resting place. And then we found it, studio number 3. Now, I'm not a unique guy. Like most, all I want in life is to build a business and pretend I love cold plunging. And the one dream I've always had is to buy an old house and gut the entire thing and make it a forever home for my family. Is that too much to ask? Well, so far, I've done 2 of those 3 things, because during our 3-month stint in temp housing, we got to gut and refurbish this mid-1800s farmhouse and barn, and lucky for me, there was a spare bedroom that was perfect for a studio space. But this time, we own the house, and it's my fault if the business doesn't work out. So we spent a couple months getting the house cleaned up and removed about 700 pounds of bat guana.
That's all poop. All poop.
4 tons of scrap wood, and just infinite shag carpet. The point of this video is to show the studio build, but the problem we ran into was that in order to actually move anything into the house and start getting the studio ready, we had to do some serious demo and cleanup first. It started with all this old gross carpet, then we really had to clean out all the junk that was left in the house. That included tons of insulation and scrap wood from old closets, and then we had to tackle the basement, which was an absolute disaster. But we had to get everything out so we could try to get our water turned on, since the pipes had been sitting stagnant for like 5 years, so everything was full of sediment. So we needed new water heaters and a new furnace and oil tank, not to mention all the wood here. Like, originally I was hopeful that the wood would be reusable, since I love woodworking and eventually I want to build out a workshop in this barn, but after we got a closer look, it was a total nightmare. Like, all the wood was soaking wet and either moldy or covered in poop. I can't really explain the smell in here to you guys, but trust me when I tell you, it was not great. We actually had to call a hazmat company to come and clean out a lot of it because we were a little sketched out, but this is a barn which is completely full of junk that came with the house, so I'm excited to go through this at some point and build out a workshop in here. Like, my daydreams are like turning this place into a fully functioning building that we can use for all sorts of activities, and if the business starts taking off, it'll be really helpful to have extra space to use as a warehouse. Also, before we get the studio set up, we had to reinforce the kitchen because some people who lived in there decided to renovate the kitchen, which meant there was a major support missing directly under where I needed it, because I had to put all my hardware and machines upstairs, which are really heavy. But after that, we got the house cleaned up, killed all the bugs that decided that this was their new home, and then started painting, so things felt a little bit more livable, because this is a mid-1700s house, so everything was so dark, we just had to try to brighten things up a little bit. Oh yeah, and also our insurance company said that they would not insure us unless we got a new roof, so we did that too. And then it was time to start. So begins studio space number 3. And hopefully the last place I need to set up so I can finally get some work done. I went back to my checklist and just started going crazy getting everything organized. Luckily, since we've got a separate guest bedroom now, I even get to cross number 1 completely off my list, and this studio room is all mine. My dream has always been to build stuff as my full-time job, and ever since I was a kid, I've been making little gadgets for people. I probably watched every episode of Shark Tank 100 times and listened to all of the How I Built This podcast, so now that I'm finally in a place to really give this dream a shot, I feel like I'm ready to learn and grow my skill set in the world of consumer product development, e-commerce, and content creation. But I think my biggest fear has been whether or not I can start to grow this thing. Like, it's one thing to have a handful of viral videos and sell some cool products, but the hard part is to build a community that will support this journey and come back more than once. I've talked to hundreds of people now that are interested in the same stuff as me, and it's given me a lot of hope for the future of this business. Like, I read an essay one time called 1,000 True Fans, and it said that all you really need to do to build a sustainable business is get 1,000 people who are really rooting for you. So thanks for being in that group. Sometimes I read the comments and I'm like, wow, the internet is way nicer and more helpful than people say. Also, I'm learning there are way better engineers out there than me, so it's cool to be able to make something and then iterate on it based on customers' feedback. But back to the studio. At this point, I set up my desk space, shoved my 3D printers in this tiny closet. I got matching workbenches all set up for manufacturing and assembly. I finally got my tool wall organized. I have a ship station so I can grab and go easily. For content, I have a light box for close-ups, and then I made this permanent rig to hold everything that I can just power on and film super effortlessly. I'm still working on storage, but if any companies out there see this and want to collaborate, hit your boy up. But what did I really learn after 3 years of trying to build a studio space? Well, 3 things really. The main thing is that I'm really full of excuses. I think I could have launched the product and built a company with what I had at any point, but I just like things set up a certain way, which definitely slows things down when the real goal isn't a studio space at all. It's building the product business. The second lesson, juggling a full-time job and starting a business at the same time is really difficult. It's not actually because of the amount of time and effort, but because you're switching between multiple priorities in your head and you never get into that nice flow state to keep the ball rolling. Like, I had so many times where I had a big video or a lot of sales and I should have just poured gasoline on it, but instead I changed my focus and the momentum died down. Lastly, understanding that nothing is permanent. That goes for the studio space, but also career stuff. I think that if we just try to grow and learn and not stop, then things will end up how they're supposed to. And lastly, number 8, the most important studio requirement of all, a sunny spot for the employee of the month to supervise while I'm building. But I still don't have a place for my dirty tools like Studio 2 had, but I do have this massive barn, so stay tuned. More to come.